Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show here on The Real News. I'm Marc Steiner. It's great to have you all with us once again. In this 2024 Democratic primary race for president, there's another candidate of sorts that in some states has taken its share of the votes. 29% in Hawaii, 19% in Minnesota, and those votes have been generated by the Uncommitted Campaign, opposing U.S. support for Israel in this war in Gaza. That's devastating Gaza, among other issues. It began in the Michigan primary, where over 100,000 Democrats voted uncommitted, and it grew from there. So some of the leaders of that campaign are joining us today. The leaders here in the state of Maryland. We are joined in studio by Ryan Harvey. Ryan Harvey is a longtime activist in this community and one of the organizers of Listen to Maryland Vote Uncommitted campaign. Ryan, good to see you again.
You too, Mark.
And two folks I've not met, but I'm looking forward to talking with. We have joining us today Lal Rubin, who is a Marine veteran of the war in Afghanistan, author of Pain is Weakness, Leaving the Body, and he's based in the Baltimore area. Good to have you with us, Lal. Good to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
And Anna Evans Goldstein is with us, a longtime organizer and activist. She's a member of the Greater Baltimore Residents for Ceasefire group and an organizer with Listen to Maryland Vote Uncommitted campaign. So good to have you all with us.
Thanks.
So let's take a step backwards and talk a bit about the history of how this campaign started and why. It seems to really be growing. I mean, there's serious numbers of voting uncommitted. Let's talk about what that means. And Andy, you're the first person I talked to about this, at least for this show. Let me start with you.
Yeah, so it actually got started in January in New Hampshire, and they had a campaign around writing in on the ballot, and it kind of took off from there. So, you mentioned some of the states that have had really successful turnouts, but in each state that's had a primary so far, there's been some sort of option, either the official vote uncommitted or a write-in campaign, and it's really taken off. And we're really excited here in Maryland to be following suit with what's been going on across the country, particularly because we are historically just a Democratic state. We have gone blue in all of the last elections for the last 30 years. And so it really sends a very strong message coming from a state such as ours that the Democratic Party at large is calling for a ceasefire, and we want to be listened to.
And let me just a little background for a second. You're a veteran. You fought in Afghanistan,
I am.
Right?
Yeah, I was in Afghanistan in 2010 during the surge.
So talk about what brought you into this campaign.
Well, I'm Jewish, aside from just being a veteran. So when I was younger, I actually worked for AIPAC. I worked as a summer campus intern. I actually was a bit of their poster boy. I sat on their board of directors as one of the student activists for a year. Yeah, so I've been through my own journey. I became very disillusioned with my own mission in Afghanistan as a Marine officer. And through that experience, I began becoming disillusioned with much of U.S. foreign policy and just the role that the United States has played in so many parts of the world. And again, being Jewish and having a prior history with AIPAC, I did end up focusing a lot on Palestine solidarity work as a graduate student. I'm a writer, so I've written some on this issue, and I've just studied it for years now. So it's something that I care a lot about.
That's a huge leap from AIPAC to being part of ceasefire.
I would say so. Yeah.
So that could be a conversation in itself. And Ryan, so you're no stranger to these kind of activist projects. So talk a bit about what drew you into this one, though.
Yeah, well, similar to Anna, we're both part of a little crew called Greater Baltimore Residents for Ceasefire. For folks in the area, we organized this. We first started organizing a pressure campaign to try to get Representative Mfume to call for a ceasefire. Organized a big sit-in in his office, brought a bunch of people out, and then following that, we built this sign-on letter with the goal of getting 25 local, Baltimore area organizations to publicly sign on, calling on our congressional delegation to call for a ceasefire. We ended up getting now 200 organizations and small businesses So we've been just, since October 7th and the response by Israel, we've been just trying to work to identify strategic ways that we can, build pressure on the U.S. government to call for a ceasefire and to really, pull its weight in regards to Israel. So the Uncommitted Campaign, we saw that, popping off in various states, and we saw that Maryland is one of those states where uncommitted is actually on the ballot, so it's counted as a candidate. And we decided to initiate a campaign, and then found out there was another group doing the same, and we merged forces, and here I am.
So the uncommitted campaign is taking place. If it gets X number of votes in certain states, in this state or any other state, it gets delegates, right? The DNC.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
If we get 15% of the state, or if we get 15% of any given congressional district, you'll be allotted delegates.
So I want to kind of wrestle a minute with a couple of larger political issues when it comes to this campaign. And I'm curious to see how you see this playing out politically in our country right now. We have this horrendous war taking place in Gaza. Close to 50,000 people have been killed. People lost under the rubble. Many more wounded. I talked to a friend of mine today who's a local rabbi who's actually acting as a medic in Gaza to help Palestinians. And his stories were just, it was really hard to listen to. So we have that, and that's what's motivating this uncommitted campaign. We're also faced in this country with the Democratic Party, which is divided between progressives and this neoliberal establishment that actually runs the party. But on the other side, you have these neo-fascist racists who could actually win the election.
Yep.
So talk a bit about that in terms of strategically how you see the work you're doing on Uncommitted fitting into that kind of more complex, not more, but that complex picture of what we face politically. And Anna, let me let you start.
Yeah, well, a couple points, for the current Uncommitted campaign, Biden is not running against Trump in the primary.
Right.
The primary is a standalone for the Democratic Party. And so we see this as an opportunity to push Biden on a key issue that Democratic voters have already been expressing for over 7 months now that they care about. Over 75% of Democrats want a ceasefire and have been calling for a ceasefire consistently. And the Biden administration continues to not listen. And so, there's this great mechanism in our country for registering dissent and sending a message. It's electoral politics. We don't get polled on our policy preferences, but we do get to vote in a candidate or vote against a candidate. And this is the mechanism to do that in the primary. So that's one sort of big overarching point. And, underlying all of that, just to kind of hammer in on, pushing Biden to be the best candidate. If we're talking about the general election in November, Trump has already said that he unequivocally supports Israel. It will be unconditional support. And so if we're talking about making the better candidate that can beat Trump in November, we want Biden to call for an immediate ceasefire. We want Biden to use his weight to push Israel to stop its genocide. And so this is really, both a mechanism for registering our dissent that we have been pushed to because our protests, our calls, our emails have not been listened to. But it's also a way to demand the candidate that the party wants.
We were about to say something, Ron?
I was just nodding in agreement.
Okay.
But, there's something really important that we're seeing, right? Like the United States has a progressive movement, dare I say we have a bit of a left, in the last 10 years. And what the Democratic Party has been doing for decades has been bending to the right wherever possible, right? Whether that's on, on military stuff, whether it's on domestic issues, whether it's on trade and economics, thinking it's a safe thing to do, right? Biden, in his last election, what took Biden from being the Joe Biden we remembered to being the I'm going to be the most progressive president in American history, right? It was the Bernie Sanders campaign. It was the progressive movement. And he, after Super Tuesday, he brought a bunch of the Biden people. He brought people from the Sunrise Movement and the Dreamers into the fold, and not just as a symbol, but said, "How do I win your people?" Right? That was the promise that brought Biden into office. The idea that they seem to be thinking, the party leadership, the people around Biden seem to be thinking that the way to win this election is to try to get the anti-Trump Republican voters to get behind Biden and basically ignore all of the groups and the individuals, this whole generation that helped bring him into office. I think that's foolish. It's foolish, and it's morally wrong because of what's beneath all of that. That scares me. And I think that this campaign, we're not out here convincing Maryland voters to vote uncommitted. We're not out there telling them, trying to convince them of one thing or another. We're just finding people who are really angry, who might not be voting anyways. On one hand, we're giving them an opportunity to vote. We might even be kind of pulling them back, right? It's giving Biden a lifeline. We're not. If we get, whatever percentage of the vote, that's not a testament to how good we are at convincing people of the issue. That's a testament to where people are. This is a 1-month campaign. We don't have a lot of time to build these deep relationships with people. We're just finding people who are out there. So I think that's a really important thing for these folks to be paying attention to.
And Neil, jump in here. Where do you think this entire campaign takes us politically?
I think, well, just kind of dovetailing on what Ryan was just saying. I mean, another way to look at this is Biden won in 2020 because of a broad coalition that included young people, included progressives, included Arabs and Muslims, and a number of other people, people of color who identify not only with Palestinians, but with historically oppressed people in poor countries that aren't white, that have been treated in similar manners throughout history. And I just think, at a very pragmatic level, in order to win again, we need that same coalition. So what we're trying to do here is not just a moral demand, although it very much is a moral demand, but it's a strategic demand that Biden needs to move in such a way that he can regain the trust of that coalition. And therefore beat Trump again. And if he doesn't regain that trust, I think we're at more risk of losing this election than if he does. So, that's my major point. I also just want to reinforce that I've phone banked many times for many different causes. This is the easiest phone banking campaign I've ever taken part in. I hardly have to do any work, whether I'm talking to someone who's very involved politically, someone who's not particularly involved politically, someone who's an active Democrat, someone who isn't an active Democrat. It doesn't really matter. It's just amazing how many of them are aware what's going on in Gaza, and how many of them are angry about it. And how many of them are willing to try to do whatever they can in their own lives to stop it. So, I think strategically we need to win the upcoming presidential election, but I think we also need to harness this kind of anger and energy towards longer term goals that include a more peaceful, just engagement with the world. Beyond just Gaza, beyond just Palestine. I think the kind of elephant in the room for American politics, really since its inception, but certainly in modern times, has been this kind of imperial role that the U.S. plays in so many parts of this world, this assumption, this arrogance that we reserve the right to rule over other peoples. We reserve the right not to listen to their own protests. And that needs to change. And I think all the young people rising up in universities right now, and for that matter, the Palestinians rising up with their own lives in Palestine, speaks to the urgency and need for that kind of change.
This is, I think, the first time I can remember in terms of what's happening in Palestine and Israel, the effect it's having on this country is much different than ever before. And I remember being a kid in '56 when the '56 war happened. In 1967, when the October War happened, I was on the front of the line to join the Israeli army to go fight. Even though I was an anti-war activist here, I was ready to go fight in Israel. But you see things that are really fundamentally changing. You can say part of it. I've seen people make arguments that part of it is being driven by anti-Semitism. There's no question in my mind that is a piece of it, always will be a piece of it. But the larger piece of it is young people saying no, and young Jews saying no. This is not in our name. I think this is a fundamental shift taking place because of this war, because of this destruction of Gaza, and this wholesale slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza. There's something really different about this moment, and it could affect this election. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear your analysis about where all that is. Go ahead, Ann. You want to start again?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind while you were talking is that, I think that a lot of our elected leaders are using the same playbook that they used when they tried to get into the Iraq war. And it's not working anymore. I think people, went through that experience and they understand the propaganda and the tools that are being utilized against them to sway their opinion. And we just have access to the truth. We have access to all of the video and all of the photos and all of the in real time news that's been coming out of Gaza. And it's horrifying. And so people, they're tired of it. And there's no way to hide it or pull the wool over people's eyes. And so, there's sort of no other choice. I mean, this is, I've been a pro-Palestine activist for a very long time. This is just absolutely astronomical in terms of how many people are aware of what's going on, have done their education, have looked into things, are talking to people about it. Even 5 years ago, people would sort of shy away from discussing Israel-Palestine because it seemed too complicated. It's not complicated. It's very simple. And I think that people are actually understanding that now, especially because of the wave of organizing that's happened in this country around state violence here. People are aware and they understand what's going on because they've experienced it.
I very well think this campaign you're involved in, where do you think it's going to? Where do you think it will take us politically at this moment? And B, I'm coming back to what we were just talking about here, which is the profound effect this Gaza war is having on this country. I mean, I more than I've ever seen before when it came to Israel-Palestine. So I'm curious where you politically all think all this is taking us, because it's coming to a crescendo.
I think going back to this first question, there's something really important that the Biden administration and other people in party leadership need to understand. It's important for us to understand it too. This whole wave of protest, and I was part of the anti-Iraq war movement. This is more unpopular than the Iraq war, according to the polls. George Bush got reelected in the middle of the Iraq war, right?
Right.
That movement never had this kind of ability to put in a presidential election, to be part of that conversation. Yes, it's true. Like, we're seeing the videos, all of this. Yes, it's true. The level of destruction is astronomical for sure. But this isn't a blip. What has changed is that these young people on these college campuses, that's the Iraq war generation. Lyle fought in Afghanistan. I lost good friends in Iraq. I lost more good friends when they came home from Iraq, from suicide. I'm from Afghanistan. This is a generation that was born and raised in war and economic crisis. And they're the generation that brought us the Occupy movement and, the modern immigrant rights movement, Black Lives Matter. This is a whole, and they see these connections. These aren't the folks on the campuses and us. We just started caring about Palestine. We care about a whole slate of very progressive issues because that's been our experience in the world. And it's what we want from our government. It's what we want from our country. It's what we want in life. And the idea, if there's people in power banking on the idea that people are going to forget about this by November, this is not going away. This is a cultural, political shift in the United States and in the world. And we want a political shift in the US government. And we thought we were going towards that. The first few years of Biden, there was some hopeful things. There was some progress. There was some real, like Lyle was talking about, there was a real coalition. And, you know, not even to mention the climate activists who've been very much a part of the protests around Palestine. This is a generational shift. We're here. It's not going away. You can't ignore it. That's a huge, very important lesson for these folks to learn. It's not the world from 20 years ago. It's the world today is different. And it's a significant factor.
Neil, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just emphasize that, I mean, everything that Anne and Ryan have said is absolutely true, particularly when it comes to the generational shift. But I think it even goes beyond young people at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as someone who's paid attention very much to veteran affairs and military family life, I mean, there's just so many military families across the country whose lives have profoundly changed as a result of the war on terror. And a lot of them are therefore keened in to the flaws and really horrors of US foreign policy. I mean, there was a major study that came out, I believe, from the University of Michigan after the 2016 election that showed that one of the reasons Trump might have won in the Midwest was that you had a lot of military families and people connected to the military that found it ended up being a false message, but he had an anti-war kind of rhetoric.
Right.
And there are a lot of people in the Midwest who are very connected to the military industrial complex in one way or another that were moved by that. So yes, I think the young people are certainly leading the charge, but I think it goes beyond just the youth.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to, this campaign will be going on, the Maryland primary coming up, and primaries around the country. And so as people have kind of devoted their time to working this campaign and making it work here in this state, but connected to the country, where do you think it's going to take us? Where do you think this campaign is going to take this battle around the war in Gaza and the coming election? And what's your analysis of where this takes us?
You know, back to what I was saying before about, you know, the fact that there's a progressive movement. It's real, it's large. And where I see this campaign going and all of these uncommitted campaigns, they're not separate from the other protests that are happening. It's all part of the same thing. And we see that when we talk to each other. This is not just about stopping what Israel's doing right now to the Palestinians. It's also about fighting for control and influence of this very popular group of people in the U.S. who want our government to be different. And, you know, I think the question as to whether, you know, is it going to be Biden or Trump? I think there's another very important question there, which is, what's the Democratic Party going to look like, and what should it look like? And this is a fight about that. And it's a very important fight because this has been happening. I mean, a lot of these, I'm 40, right? Like my whole life has been defined, you know, in part by the Democratic Party talking about things and then not following through on them, making promises they don't fulfill, talking about these values, but then, you know, the corporate money speaks a lot louder and you get what you get. And then it blew up in our faces when Trump was going around the country talking about the bad trade deals, talking about the failure of the Iraq War and the financial crisis and all of this. Democrats need to be worrying about policy, not about chasing, you know, the Republican rhetoric around it. You heard it a few weeks ago. Trump, the crowd behind him started chanting "Genocide Joe." And what did he say? They're not wrong. If he smells that that's popular when campaign time comes around, I guarantee you he will run on being critical of Biden's handling of this and criticizing him for being a murderer. If that's going to get him elected, he will. And the Democrats are going to go, oh, we thought being tough, we thought sending the cops into the campuses and being, no criticism of Israel was going to win us these people. That's not how the game works. And they're playing a game, and we're not, right? We're talking about we want fundamental changes in the U.S. government. That's what it's about.
And I think, to kind of wrap things up here a little bit, Anna and Lyle, just picking up on what Ryan was saying, I mean, it seems to me that this war in Gaza is one of the most critical moments we've faced in modern history. Something is deeply shifting because of this war. You can see the momentum in this country, younger generations of Jews and others in this country saying no. So you've all been involved in this stuff for a while. So I'm curious where you think this takes us. What do you think is going to be? What are the possibilities where this could take us because of war in Gaza? I mean, it could lead to this neo-fascist state under Trump. It could lead to the Democrats kind of imploding, and it could be a disaster all through the Middle East. I mean, this is a very serious moment we're facing. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to get your kind of thoughts on where you think it takes us, what your analysis and work tells us. And let me start this time. Go over to Neil and then come to Anna. Lyle, excuse me.
No problem. So I think one of the interesting things that we've seen in recent months, and particularly in recent weeks, is a number of labor unions standing up in solidarity with Palestine. You have the UAW that's released multiple statements now, not just calling for a ceasefire, but also defending all the students that are getting beat up by cops and relating their own experience on the picket line getting beat up by cops with the students that are getting beat up. One of the first labor leaders to come out against Israeli action in Gaza was a Jewish anti-Zionist, the head of the, I believe, the Postal Workers Union.
The APWU.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of potential for kind of broader coalition building in the years ahead. A kind of broad, if not maybe anti-imperialist front, then at least a broad kind of more progressive foreign policy front that I haven't seen my entire lifetime. And I agree with you, Mark, that the major concern right now is just making sure that Trump and the neo-fascists don't take power of the government and effectively preclude those types of possibilities. So I think we have to play two different games at the same time. One, we have to be very pragmatic and very focused about making sure that the far right doesn't gain the kind of power that they potentially can gain. But we also have to look more, in a more forward-thinking way about what we want this country to actually look like in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I just put a star next to both things that Lyle and Ryan said. Yes, I am scared by the potential prospect of the rise of the far right in this country, and that is a scary place that we could potentially go. But we're in a scary place now. We are already in a scary place, and we have been for some time. And I think the sort of more optimistic and positive view that I like to move with is that what we're building right now is just the most broad-based coalition of progressive organizers, activists, voters, citizens, non-citizens in this country that we've ever seen. The Greater Baltimore Residents for Ceasefire letter that Ryan mentioned earlier had the most broad-based sign-ons from organizations that never would have worked together before then. You have people working together now that have never organized together, people kind of crossing into a realm that they've not been before with each other. And I just see that happening more and more. And I think that that's really exciting. And I think that actually can take us to a really positive place.
And something I wanted to say that, an important thing, if Trump gets reelected, we're the ones that are going to be facing that, these people in this movement. If there's another Charlottesville, it's going to be these people that are the ones that are there. Some of them were there, some of us were out in the streets facing the Proud Boys when they were marching in the build up to January 6th. That's who these protests are. It's these young people. It's diverse, real diversity. Like, these people are at serious risk if Trump becomes the president. So we care extremely about that, of course. Like, and we feel very, very strongly that the course that Biden's going right now is the course that leads to a Trump reelection. Yeah.
And I do thank the three of you, and Anna, the positive note you brought us is really important for us to hear, because it is building. And I think that the three of you putting all your efforts and literally your bodies on the line at times to stop what's going on, both in terms of what's happening in Gaza and for a better America. And I do appreciate the work you're doing. It warms the cockles of an old activist heart. to see the next generation really kind of standing up and organizing and saying there's a different way to do this. So we'll see what happens in the primaries coming with the uncommitted vote. It'll be here in Maryland, be across the country, and that will take people to the DNC, I'm sure, inside and outside, and we'll be covering that as well. And I want to thank all three of you for being with us here today, the Steiner Show. Hannah Evans, Goldstein, pleasure to going back and forth and helping put this together. Appreciate that time. Lyle Rubin, pleasure to meet you. And Ryan Harvey, always good to see you.
Of course.
So thank all three of you for being with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you once again for joining us today, all of you and our guests. And thanks to Cameron Granadino for running the show and editing this program, and the tireless Kelly Rivara for making it all work behind the scenes, and everyone here at The Real News for making this show possible. So please, let me know what you thought about what you heard today, what you'd like us to cover. Just write to me at mss@therealnews.com, and I'll write to you right back. Once again, thank you to Anna Evans Goldstein, Lyle Rubin, Ryan Harvey for the work they're doing and for joining us today. So for the crew here at The Real News, I'm Marc Steiner. Stay involved, keep listening, and take care.
Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please, tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.